I'm Bob Smith, and this is Talk USA. Here's a preview of tonight's guest.
General Douglas MacArthur. Douglas MacArthur was born in 1880 in Little Rock, Arkansas, to parents Arthur MacArthur and Mary MacArthur. MacArthur was a distinguished general in American history, serving in multiple wars. He first served as a general in World War I and was the chief of staff for the new 42nd Infantry. He became most well known, however, during World War II. He was originally stationed in the Philippines, but due to their proximity to Japan, him and his troops were forced out, and MacArthur was restationed to Australia. However, MacArthur vowed that he would return to help the Philippine people. After a brief island-hopping campaign in which MacArthur led his troops up from Australia back towards Japan, he was able to return to the Philippines. After this return, MacArthur was able to successfully liberate the Philippines from the Japanese rule and free the people. This helped him to fulfill his promise that he had made earlier. Ultimately, General MacArthur was the one to accept Japan's surrender at the end of World War II. Not only that, but he also took great steps in leading the reform of Japan after the war. He stated that he wanted to bring peace, freedom, and liberty to the war-ravaged nation and make sure that they would enable a democracy and no longer have a monarchy. The final war that General MacArthur served in was the Korean War. MacArthur led the United Nations troops to a successful offensive and first attack in the Incheon Landing. He was then able to drive the troops all the way north near the border of China on the Yalu River. However, he became a little bit too offensive for President Truman's liking, and so he was taken out of commission. This was a very controversial decision, as MacArthur was backed by the American public. However, and the United States would end up losing the Korean War. Some people argue that if MacArthur had been left in and his plan was followed, the American and the United Nations forces could have won. General MacArthur passed away in 1964 at the age of 84.
Hello, and welcome back to Talk USA. I'm your host, Bob Smith, and today on the show we have a very special guest. That special guest is General Douglas MacArthur. So why don't you come on out, General?
Attention! At ease.
Thank you for coming on today.
Nice of you to have me.
Have a seat.
Thank you.
So, General, we all know that you're a very experienced and accomplished general. So why don't we talk about your most recent war and adventure, the Korean War.
Yes, that was a much more difficult war for me to handle because of, unlike in previous wars, I did not have the ability to scout out the territory ahead, so I was going in blind, which is obviously a much more difficult problem.
Indeed, that does make it much more difficult, especially going into foreign territory. But you certainly did start out strong, leading your men to the Incheon Landing.
Yes, I had a very strong faith in my men, and I believed that they could do everything they needed because, anyways, my plan worked, and I knew it would work because they were so strong and under such good leadership.
Certainly, that's a great faith that you have in your men. But now, obviously, the Korean War has come to almost a standstill. Do you have any recommendations that you can make to President Truman at this time?
Yes, I believe he should have a raid on the mainland in China and keep the Chinese out of Vietnam and Korea because we don't want the communism to spread there, as that would cause many more problems than we do not need.
Indeed, we've already seen how communism has started this war in Korea. We certainly don't need another one. And do you have any fears about the nationalists and their rising power?
Yes, as nationalists, we've already gone partially into what they wanted, but they're going way too far, they want too much, and they need to control how they act.
Indeed, they could be very troublesome for the government going forward into this venture. So how do you feel about Truman taking you out of commission for the end of the Korean War?
I felt it was very wrong. I felt it was unjustified. The American people had backed me, and that showed I was right. I wanted to do what I believed in, and that was winning. It is fatal to enter any war without the will to win it.
And we know now that you're very experienced, very successful. So why don't we talk about one of your, probably the most well-known of your wars, World War II. Do you have any memories or experiences from the war that stand out to you?
Yes, I remember I made a grand prediction before the war about mobilizing troops and creating more air forces, because I knew that heading into the war, whoever had the better air force was better off in the war, because the soldiers on the ground and the soldiers at sea would not be able to stand through it.
You know, we saw that in World War I with trench warfare that got very, very stalemate, got to a stalemate very quickly. Now, I know, I'm sure you have some very vivid memories of the fighting as well. Do you mind if we talk about the Philippines for a little bit?
Yes, when I was in the Philippines, I was angered when I was told that I had to leave, because I wanted to continue to fight there, because I thought we were this close to finishing off the war. But I was told I had to leave and go to Australia, and I vowed that I shall return. And later on, I said that I will return, and I have returned, and I helped them out, just like I promised them earlier on.
That certainly was an amazing return. I believe we have a photo. Can you please pull up the photo for the audience? And this is General MacArthur leading his men up the beaches on the Philippines upon his return. Truly an amazing photo and an amazing man, showing both his leadership and his ability to be a leader, not more than a boss, just bossing his men around, but actually leading them up the beaches.
Well, I believe that a general is just as good or just as bad as the men that are in his command. It is not about the general, but it's about the men and their ability to follow his orders and the ability for them to work together.
Wow, a truly inspirational quote and feelings from General MacArthur. Must have felt pretty amazing to be appointed Supreme Commander of the Allied Forces, no?
Yes, it was a great honor, and it shows that hard work truly pays off.
And I also understand that you received a Bronze Star for your defense of the Philippines. How does this make you feel?
It felt really good. I was able to finish what I had started before I was called off into Australia. I said I was going to return, and I was able to fulfill a promise that I had previously made.
And finally, you were the one to receive Japan's surrender. How does it feel to know that you had finally won the war?
It was a really great relief. I was able to bring my men and overpower the Japanese forces, and then I was able to end this dreadful war.
And after the war, you actually took control of reforming Japan. What made you take this initiative to bring democracy and peace to this war-ravaged nation?
I wanted to help those who were innocent, and I wanted to end communism. I wanted to bring democracy to Japan, and I wanted to bring them freedom.
Now, another great general and now current president that you served alongside with in World War II was General Eisenhower. However, it is rumored that FDR wanted you to be the primary commander over Eisenhower. Is this true?
Yes, that is very true. And it was certainly justified as wanting him to make me the primary commander over Eisenhower.
Well, what makes you say that?
He was indecisive, he was weak, he was selfish, he was untrustworthy, he was lacking in initiative.
You know what? We're out of time.
What do you mean we're out of time?
We're out of time for today's episode. I'm sorry. Thank you.
We should not be out of time. I have much more to say on this topic.
It's alright. Thank you. Thank you for joining us, General. It was a pleasure talking to you. And join us next week on Talk USA for an exclusive interview with President John F. Kennedy.